Hey guys, this is Drew Brashler with DBB Audio. I have been putting together a full tutorial series on the brand new Behringer Wing console. And this video is video 401. This is where I'm going to put together all of the different things that I've taught you from the 1, 200, and 300 level series videos. And today is just going to be a day where I am pulling back the curtain and showing you how I build a mix. Now, this is not going to be for everyone. The way that I build a mix is going to be different than someone else, and the way they build a mix is going to be different than someone else. So the things that I choose might not suit your type of music, your style of music, or even your venue or your church correctly in the way that I am mixing. The way that I am mixing my music is the way that it suited the music that was coming off of the stage the best to suit the room and the people that were in it to be able to experience God through the music. So today is going to be a longer video than normal, but I really hope that you enjoy this video in seeing how I put together a mix from just a very basic empty slate to the full-on polished finish. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, the first thing that I do when I am setting up a console for myself to mix on is I set up some very basic things. I have my DCAs, which are going to be controlling my remote inputs. So a DCA is not a summation point, it is just a remote control to the inputs that are assigned to it. With the Behringer Wing, I'm actually allowed to select outputs from my DCAs. And so my drum DCA, I actually have selected on my drum bus. So when I press and hold this, you'll see that my drum buses are selected. Going on to drum buses, I actually set up drum buses. I set up a drum bus for all of my drums, including cymbals, to go through. And then I set up a parallel compression bus where my kick, toms, and snare go through that, very heavily compressed, and then get a little bit of EQ tweaking to then join with the rest of the drum bus together to make this very big sound. Additionally, I have other DCAs here set up, whereas I have bass guitar, electric guitar, keys, tracks, vocals, and my band DCA is actually controlling my band bus. So my band master bus I have controlling with this DCA. Those different things make me very fast on this console. If I didn't have those back-end things set up, things wouldn't be moving as quickly for me when I'm actually in a show. Now, granted, all of these DCAs are sitting at 0, so there is no gain or attenuation applied to any of the things that are here. But if I'm going into, say, a down chorus or something that is very quiet, I have the ability to move a lot of volume at my fingertips. So I've zeroed out everything on my faders, and everything is blank currently, and I'm going to start kicking in certain portions and show you what I am doing and why. And so I'm going to start playing some music and adding in some music from here. So let's go ahead and give a listen to the different sources that I have. So we have a bass guitar, we have electric 1, electric 2, keys, then we have various different tracks. So we have some percussion on 1, 2, some synth and guitar on 3, 4, some vocal effects on 5 and 6, and an electric on 7. We have vocals sitting on here, backup vocalist, and another backup vocalist. On 13 through 24, I have my kick my kick out. This is a Beta 52. I have my kick 901, which is on the inside. I have my snare top, which of course he's not playing snare. Give me a second. Okay, snare bottom. Hats. Rack tom. Floor tom. And I have my overheads. Now, one thing that I notice about my overheads is they're actually backwards. Because in my stereo image right now, I hear the hi-hat on the left. So let's go ahead and flip that. Perfect. Additionally, I have some tom triggers. So I have a trigger on the toms, on the rack, and the floor. So I will end up using my gates keyed from these triggers. So let's go ahead and start building mix here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the kick drum. So a couple different things here that I'm doing is adding a little bit of EQ to this kick drum. So the first thing is this sound. I don't like that sound on a kick drum. It's not necessarily very nice. I don't need it. It's very papery and boxy, so I'm going to take that out. And so just by doing that, I have a lot more low end. Now I am going to boost the low end. There's this pillowiness right here that I'm going to cut out. Now, I can add in a compressor here. It's a little bit too much compression going on. So before, after, I am doing a little bit of boosting here. And one thing that I can do is using this crossover mode, I can actually add in a little bit of the low end back into it. Okay, let's go ahead and add in our kick in. So with this guy, I'm going to use the primary source expander to basically be a gate. And you can get to this by going into your gate expander and then picking up your source expander. So this is the source extractor. My bad, I'm sorry. And so basically depth is how much attenuation I want to have apply. We can see the gain meter, the gain reduction meter happening right here. And then this is my threshold. I do have to set to fast, so it is acting fast. Now my EQ circuit here, I am doing some various cuts and some boosts. And let's go ahead and tune this on and see what I'm doing here. So I am adding a little bit of low end. And I am doing some major cutting because of that really papery sounding kick. Now, one thing I also do with both the kick drum is I go in and apply my low cut and high cut to both of them. I will low cut about 33 hertz and high cut a little bit less than 7, basically to make it so that I'm not killing my subwoofers with a massive amount of low end. So here's my kick 901. Perfect. So let's go to the snare top. Gonna add in a low cut and a high cut here. So there is a little bit of volume down here. That we can get in. Now, one thing that I'm going to use today, which is a little bit different than what I would normally do, is I'm going to use this effect called P bass. And what this is going to do is this is going to give me a boost around 80 hertz on the snare. Now, I would prefer to fix the problem actually at the source with the microphone with a little bit slightly different placement. But because I'm mixing some tracks that I did not place the mics on, for this, I am going to be doing a little bit of different things to it. So if I did have the ability to go change the miking technique, I would do that before I would reach for effects. Additionally, I would be doing the same thing before I would be doing EQ as well. Another thing that I can do instead of that is use a dynamic EQ. And what a dynamic EQ is going to allow me to do is boost a certain frequency when it is hitting a certain threshold. So here's what the dynamic EQ would be doing. It's not as much of the effect as I'm wanting, so I'm going to pick the P bass. Let's go ahead and toss it through a distressor here to get a little bit of gain reduction. And we can use this crossover mode. Perfect. Next thing I'm going to do is add in the snare bottom. So this guy I'm going to also put through a PSE, basically applying about 16 dB of gain reduction on the gate. Next, I'm going to go in and do a little bit of EQing. So I'm going to go in and apply my low cut and high cut. No high cut today. On my low EQ, I'm going to take out a little bit of the lows. And we're going to add in some of that sparkle. I'm going to toss this into a distressor. Now this is going to be a lot of compression. I'm wanting that sizzly snare sound, and by using a lot of compression, I'm going to get that. Okay, let's go ahead and give the toms a listen to. I'm going to find a spot in the DAW that has the toms going. Okay, found a spot in the DAW where the toms are going on here. So I'm going to go and take a look at my EQ first. Now, my EQ is doing some crazy stuff here, so I'm going to limit that a little bit here. But first thing is I will apply a low cut and a high cut to the toms. Now, the reason behind this is because I don't want the subwoofer of the kick drum bleeding through on these tom mics. Additionally, the high cut is going to remove some of the high end of the cymbals that are right next to those toms. Now, like I said earlier, I have triggers on these toms, and so I am going to set up my gate to be triggered from those triggers. So let's go ahead and give that a listen first. So I'm going to listen in key solo on channel 31, which is my rack trigger. Here's the trigger sound. Okay, and so what we can do is we can actually go in and using a band pass filter, we can go listen in for that very distinct sound of that trigger. Which is right there. So now I'm going to go back to my gate. I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to set my range to about 20. I don't want to do anything super drastic, but then the next thing I'm going to do is have the attack be very short, the hold time pretty standard around 80, and then the release time probably around 300 milliseconds. Let's give this a listen. And I am going to take the range down a little bit more. Perfect. Okay, now let's give a listen into the gate on the floor tom here. So we can hear that the kick drum is actually causing this trigger to go a little bit. But you hear the higher end portion of this trigger that we're going to key in on with this key filter. Right there. So let's go find my bandpass, and I'm going to go back over and try and find that frequency. Almost there. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and turn on this gate, and we'll set the range to about 40, attack at 0. Hold time will need to be a little bit longer on this because it is a floor tom, so the sustain of the drum is a little bit longer. One more time. And I can see right now that my threshold on my floor tom is a little bit too high still. It is too low, sorry. Perfect. So here they are together. Okay, so let's move over to EQ now. I'm going to first EQ my rack tom. Now with the rack tom, I'm wanting to have a massive amount of low end. I'm going to want to cut the mids within the 400 range, which is usually where that boxiness is. And then I'm wanting to add a pretty big spike up in the attack range before my high cut. Okay, and let's go EQ the floor tom now. I have the same thing set up here. So I'm going to apply my low cut and my high cut, and we can see that I'm applying a boost up here, right where my high cut is, also adding in some low end and cutting out the 400s here. And I can even bring that low cut down just a little bit. Okay, now let's go ahead and add in the compressor on these guys. And so what the compressor is going to do is it's going to compress the first initial hit of the stick on the tom, and then it is going to release when the sustain starts coming in. So on the floor tom specifically, I'm going to turn it off, and we're going to give it a listen, and then I'm going to turn the compressor back on. We'll give it one more listen, and just listen to the sustain of the tom and see how long it holds out for. Okay, one more time. Okay, next I'm going to turn on the compressor on the floor tom. It's very subtle, but it holds on for a little bit longer. Let's go ahead and add in the overheads into this. So I am taking out this papery sound and this sound as well in the overheads. Let's add in a little bit of hi-hat. And now the hi-hat, definitely need the low cut in there. Let's see what I'm doing in on the EQ here. So we can hear that really gross sound of the snare that really doesn't need to be there for the hi-hat. And then we have a basically it's just tailoring off the low end here. So now that I have the drums here set, I'm going to want to take these into a drum bus and then into a parallel drum bus. So let's go ahead and get that set up. So I'm going to take all of the drum instruments, so kick drum, snare drum, toms, and send them to both my drum group and my parallel drum group. And we can see that here. Then any of my cymbals, I'm only having going to drums. Okay, so over on my drum bus, I am leaving this by itself. It is going to the main band bus here, and then I have my parallel drum bus that is going into a distressor, followed by a very interesting EQ curve, basically adding in some low end, cutting some mids, and adding some high end in. Now let's go ahead and give a listen to what this actually sounds like. Here's what the drum parallel sounds like. So one thing that I am hearing in this is there's a lack of verb around the snare. So I am going to add in a little bit of verb in and add it into the snare drum and the toms here. So I actually already have that set up, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute that. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this is probably too much verb. But when it's in the whole mix, it's going to be masked by the rest of the frequencies that are in there. So let's go ahead and check out the rest of the band mix, and then we can go and see if this is enough or too little. So I'm going to take a look at my bass guitar here. And the first thing that I'm going to set up here is a dynamic EQ. And I'm actually going to take the key source from my kick drum. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to center this frequency knob on my bass guitar into where the fundamental frequency is of the kick drum. Doing this is going to reduce the bass guitar frequency to allow the kick drum to come through. And then once that kick drum has come through, the level of the bass guitar in that frequency range will boost back up. The next thing I'm going to do is add in just a slight amount of compression on this bass guitar, just to keep it level in the terms of the entire song. Just very little. Okay, let's add in some keys. I'm gonna add in a little bit of compression in on this just to level out some of the very loud portions of it. Now, one thing I do find interesting is in the overall mix, this could get a little bit bright. So one thing I am going to use is the tilt EQ and slightly bring the highs down a little bit. ahead and add in some tracks here. So in listening to this, they are a bit aggressive. In a very loud mix, I am mindful of how much high end I am including into the mix. High end can come off brittle in some PAs at high volume. And so by reducing the amount of high end that I have, or upper range, I can actually get a little bit louder in my mix without it hurting in someone's ears. So typically, if someone is complaining about volume, it's typically because the high end in the 2K and up range is too much. So by adding a little bit of a roll off on the high frequencies, I can get a little bit louder of a mix in the room and not have it sound so painful. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of that tweaking on these tracks here. So I'm going to add in two things. I'm going to add in a compressor and then also add in some tilt EQ on these. And what I'm doing here is a little bit of light compression. So very, very light compression, 2.5 to 1 on the ratio. And let's see how this does. So something interesting that I'm noticing is the keys player is copying what the tracks are doing. So something that I will sometimes do is insert a verb directly on the channel. And so I have that with my tracks here. I have a vintage plate on this with a decay of about 1.5 seconds and a little bit of pre-delay. And I'm actually mixing this back in with the original signal. And so here's what it sounds like with it dry. And here's with it in. So one is much more in your face, the other is not. Adding in the keys back into this. Same thing I can do is with the electric guitar. Because if I add in the electric, it is identical. All right, let's give this electric guitar a listen. So this first guitar is on an amplifier, and there is some interesting information that can be found in the very high end of a guitar. And this is going to sound very silly to boost up here, but it ends up making this more distorted sound in the guitar. So let's go ahead and see that and listen to it with the band solo. This, in combination with a high cut, will give you a very cool sound with the electric guitar. Now I am going to apply the tilt on this. I'm going to add in a compressor. I'm adding in about 2 dB. And let's go ahead and add in a gate for when he is not playing. And we will make the release time a little bit longer. Okay. Okay, so here's where I can hear that I don't have enough verb on the snare. Perfect. So I'm getting a pretty good sense on my band bus here. Now, one thing that I am going to do is I'm going to go to my band bus and insert a slight compressor. Now, this compressor is going to be doing a little bit of mild compression, and I have this currently set to a 3:1 ratio. Now, the benefit of doing this is I can actually compress my whole band and keep their volume contained while having the vocals in a different bus and having them be a little bit higher on sound. So let's go ahead and dig in on the vocals now.
You are good. You are good to me. I can hear your voice calling out for me.
So, seems that this guy isn't actually singing, but we have a lead vocalist and a backing vocalist.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on. I can see.
Something I notice is there's a lot of background noise, and the PSE is one of my favorite things to remove some of the background noise just with a slight gate. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those on both of these, all three of these inputs here.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on, I can see your light.
And so just by turning those on, I've actually removed a lot of the background noise. Here, let's turn them off.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will.
Okay, let's go ahead and turn them back on.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on, I can see your light chasing after me.
Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is actually reach for my favorite plugin on the X32, but it was very confusing to use, but it's called the Combinator. And on the X32, it's called the Dual Combinator or the Stereo Combinator, and on the Behringer Wing, it's just called the Combinator. But the great thing is Behringer has fully updated the user interface, and it is so much easier to use and understand. So I'm going to dive into that on Danny's vocal here. I have it inserted on Effects 9, and I'm just going to turn it on. And so the cool thing is about this is you can actually see the crossover frequencies moving. And so I have this crossover, the first band of crossover, set for the low end. I have this middle band, or band 2, kind of in the middle range of a nasally sound that he has going on. This is in the little bit upper mids. This is going to be in the band 4 is going to be more in the consonants portion and main energy of that S or a T or any consonants that are happening. And then this is where the syllables end up being with the sparkliness portion of a vocal. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on and we'll see what happens here.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on.
So that's band 1 soloed, band 2, band 3, band 4, band 5. And so the benefit of the Combinator is it is a 5-band compressor. So it is a multi-band compressor. So it's going to apply different compression throughout the frequency range of Danny's vocal. And I'm also going to apply this on Donna's vocal and Jordan's vocal, even though he's not really singing on this song. So let's see how that sounds.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on, I can see your light chasing after me.
Okay, so right there, light was quite loud. So next, I'm going to apply a little bit of EQ and some low cut to this, and get rid of some of the subwoofer that you can hear in the background, and then get this ready to go into a very heavy compression. So on Danny's vocal, we'll start out with the EQ. I'm going to do a low cut of 100, and same thing with Donna, and same thing with Jordan. Now, the reason behind this is because I don't want any subwoofer energy going through their vocal microphone. And these singers aren't actually creating any subwoofer energy that's going to be pertinent to the music that we're playing today. So by doing a low cut, I can remove a lot of the rumbliness that's in the background. So let's hear it without it first.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on, I can see your love for me.
It's a lot better. Let's go ahead and turn on some EQ.
You will never fail. Come on, I can see your light chasing after.
Okay, so right there, light. It's very abrupt. I can see your light, and the light is very aggressive. So I'm going to add in my favorite vocal compressor, and that is the 1176, or in this case, on the Behringer Wing, it's called the 76 limiter amp. And on the Behringer X32, it's called the Ultimo compressor. And this thing is amazing. And I use this with a 12-to-1 ratio, and I get some very heavy compression going on, and it gives it a very rock sound. I will typically set my attack to 3, my release all the way to 7, and then I will vary the input volume until I'm getting enough gain reduction, and then I will raise the output volume to gain the signal back up to unity. So let's go ahead and insert these and give it a sound. And we'll listen to that light.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on! I can see your light chasing after me.
Okay, so you can also see that my gain is much lower on these channels. And so if I add the band back in, I'm going to be able to stay on the unity gain rather than sitting all the way up here in the +5 to +10. So let's go ahead and try that.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on! I can see your light chasing after me. You are good. You are good to me. I can hear your voice calling out for.
Okay, so we can hear that the light is still a little bit abrasive sometimes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my vocal bus and I'm going to turn on a bus compressor on the vocal bus. And so I have my SSL bus compressor, the Soul Bus Comp, and I'm doing some very light compression, 3-to-1 ratio, mild attack, quick release, and having the gain, the threshold set at a pretty high level.
Your love for me, even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on! I can see your light chasing after.
Yes, light is no longer lighting up my head. Sorry for the bad pun, but light, before I added this compressor in, was very abrupt and very abrasive. And so I added in this bus compressor to basically level off that signal just a little bit more. Now, if I was to try to do all of this compression, because I have the combinator, an 1176, and the vocal bus compressor, if I add up all of the compression that's actually taking place on all of those at one time, when they are loud and screaming and in the chorus, I could probably get up to 20, maybe 30 dB of compression, which sounds like a lot. But because I'm doing it in multiple spots throughout the chain with different attack and release times, it is able to be very transparent. So let's go ahead and listen to the whole mix from the beginning. And I'm going to add in a little bit of vocal verb and delay here too.
Struggled through the garden, following a serpent, tempted, but your love ran after me. You gave me what I needed, stole away my secrets. How could I deserve your love for me? Even in my weakness, you are always there. Come on! I can see your light chasing after me. Sing, you are good. You are good to me. I can hear your voice calling out for me. You are good. You are good to me. Yeah. Put your hands together. Come on.
So what the vocal delay and the vocal verb are doing is just giving it a little bit of color, a little bit to listen to in those emptier spots. The next thing that I want to be focusing on is the musicality portion and who is actually taking the lead when I'm mixing. And so this is where it gets into the musical portion of an engineer. It's not all about just setting and forgetting. It is about mixing. So when you are mixing a band, you shouldn't just set all the faders and say, I'm good, and sit back in your chair. You should be actively using this soundboard as a musical instrument. You as a sound person is as much of a part of the band as the band is a band. Without you, you couldn't be giving a good sound in the show. So use your console in a way that you can benefit the sound that the band is giving you and give it some dynamics, give it some push and pulls, and maybe ride some instruments that are taking the lead and do that in the song where they need to be. Now, this also comes back to needing to know the music. So if you are mixing a band, you need to know their music. If that means that you're going to be mixing a guest band, grab their CD, grab their iTunes playlist, and listen to it as much as you can before it comes time for you to mix that band. Because your musical tastes could be quite different than the band's sound. And if you try to take a rock sound to a jazz band, it's going to be a train wreck. So let's go ahead and do some mixing.
Struggled through the garden, following a serpent, tempted, but your love ran after me. You gave me what I needed, stole away my secrets. How could I deserve your love for me? Even in my weakness, you are always there. Come on, I can see your light chasing after me. You are good, you are good to me. I can hear your voice calling out for me. You are good, you are good to me. Yeah. Put your hands together, come on. Yeah. Woo. I struggled through the desert, stranded by my failure, empty but your love after me. You gave me what I needed, broken, I'm completed. I do not deserve your love for me. Even in my failure, you will never fail. Come on, I can see your light chasing after me. You are good, you are good to me. I can hear your voice calling.
There's my mix. I do hear some things that I could probably get better. I could probably get a little bit better in the vocal clarity and the high end. And I could probably get the musicality of the instruments a little bit more tight and figure out where the push and pull is in this music. But for just a quick rundown of how I'm getting my music from one point to the other, this is a very good picture of it. And as you're mixing, build the repertoire of different tricks and tools like the bass guitar, where we use this dynamic EQ. If we go and listen into a middle portion of this song, I'm going to mute the vocals here, and we just listen to the bass guitar and the kick drum. I'm going to turn off the dynamic EQ and then turn it back on, and you'll notice the kick drum sounds a little bit more impactful when the dynamic EQ is in. And you're probably thinking, well, maybe this is going to adversely affect the sound of the guitar, of the bass guitar, and not really. Granted, he's playing up at the upper register. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Again, my name is Drew Brashler, dbbaudio.com. I have a blog there with a whole bunch of free tutorials that are there for you to check out, a bunch of RF engineering articles, as well as my YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can be up to date with the most recent releases of my videos that I'm releasing on the Behringer products. Thank you again, and have a great day.